My guest today knows the draft board inside and out. He's one of the sharpest drafters on Underdog, and he's about to share with us his favorite structure for current drafts, his favorite player targets, his favorite stacks, and most spicy of all, why week 17 isn't the only week that matters. Let's get to it. Madison Parkhill, you have done a ton of drafts. You write about drafting on your great Substack, reducing uncertainty. And I want to know, the people want to know, what is your favorite structure to do in drafts in 2025 right now?
So far through this year, my main target has been a 1-2-5-1. That's through 9 rounds. I like either getting an elite quarterback or an elite tight end, just depending on the draft. But I feel like that structure, the teams I like most are something very close to 1-2-5-1 through 9, and usually that leads to a 2 quarterback in the window build this year. The quarterbacks are a little bit undervalued, I think, specifically like right after pick 100 or so compared to last year, and so that's kind of what I'm looking at the target.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe a little bit unique in that it seems like the way kind of the meta is forming, the way ADP kind of shakes out, is that we're getting a ton of late round quarterback and a ton of late round tight end teams this year, sometimes on the same team themselves, but a lot of 3 quarterback, 3 tight end builds. It seems like your favorite structure is maybe a little off of that specific path.
Yeah, for sure. Those who have read my work for years, I like getting a lead tight end normally. I do think it's 3 tight end is a little better this year than the past. So usually I'd say I'm ending up with either 3 quarterbacks or 3 tight ends, but not doing a lot of teams that have both of those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about your favorite player target? Which guys are you going out of your way to get early in drafts right now?
Yeah, no surprise. The main one for me is Josh Downs. He's dominant from a talent standpoint. He can win at all levels. I think the reception perception came out the other day. You see he's green or yellow at everything except for 9 routes, which he doesn't run a whole lot of. He was dominant, and the ESPN's receiver rating, yards per route run, targets per route run, you go through basically any metric, and Downs is just one of the best receivers in the league. Obviously, he goes where he goes because of the Colts situational concerns. Anthony Richardson last year was dead last in catchable percentage. So the situation is not good. Even if Daniel Jones starts, we're not talking about anything, not even average starting quarterback ability. So that's why he's cheap, in my opinion. But I really just want to bet on the talent in that range, especially as I'm looking to kind of round out. He's either my 4th or 5th receiver on a lot of teams for that structure.
Yeah, and how did you feel about, it seems like we're getting more and more indications that Daniel Jones is going to be the quarterback for at least the start of the season, maybe the majority of the season. Does that make you more bullish on Downs? Does it make you worried if the market is more bullish and then he moves up? Like, how have you been thinking about the quarterback situation?
Yeah, both of those things. So I wrote back in April during the big board, I looked at what Daniel Jones, his accuracy metrics were compared to Joe Flacco, which Downs produced really well with last year. And he's pretty similar. I think he was like a percentage point or 2 off in terms of catchable target percentage to Flacco. And they're both about 15% better than Richardson. So you're getting a step up. But I think with the latest news that Richardson's been injured, may not be ready for training camp, the market's adjusting to that. I saw Downs up to about, I think, 87 in ADP today.
Yeah.
He was like late 90s, almost a full round behind that at the start. And I think he'll keep going. I think there's no reason he should go behind Diggs, Ayuk. I think he's pretty comparable to Jaden Reed, where they're probably both just going to be in 3 receiver sets. And so that's kind of the range, I think, for me, that once he gets to that point, I'll start laying off a little more, maybe switch to Pittman or one of those, the other guys who's still closer to that, end of close to pick 100.
Very nice. What about your favorite stack, assuming it's not Danny Dimes to Josh Downs?
Yes, no Danny Dimes right now. Maybe if we get confirmed, he's the starter. I very much like getting. I think Dak Prescott is the leading part of that two quarterback in the window tier that I mentioned. That's relatively cheap compared to years past. And so between CD is obviously elite. Nothing crazy there. I take him quite a bit, and then Pickens, to me, I think he's not going to displace Lamb. He's not really a true alpha, but in the games where Dak goes off, the chances that Pickens is hitting some long bomb that speeds the game up, that you get the correlated points with. Lamb is still, a volume monster. That to me is a very high ceiling stack that doesn't cost that much. Lamb obviously first round, but Pickens, 4-5 turn, Dak in the hundreds. And so that stack, I think, both from a season-long perspective, if their pass rate is high, and from a weekly standpoint, have a really high ceiling chance to outperform our expectations.
When you're doing those Dallas stacks, are you interested in Ferguson or any of the running backs as part of a bigger Dallas bet?
Ferguson, absolutely. That tight end range, like the quarterback, I'll have a piece out in a few days on it, but we've just pushed tight ends so far down, especially those mid-round tight ends this year, that, a year ago we were taking Ferguson, I don't know, like 80 or so, whatever it was, maybe it was 2 years ago, but he's, I think, proven to have some spike week upside in him. And so, yeah, I'm usually looking to target either my first or second tight end around that range. And so, yeah, I'm definitely on Ferguson. Usually queue him up right after I take Dak. As far as the running backs, I don't know. I think I'm like 4% on all of Blue, Sanders, Javonte, just kind of riding the wave early on. I don't have a strong stance. Share the concerns. I think Javonte being bad, Jaden Blue not being big enough for a huge workload, and then who knows, Miles Sanders. He's just so cheap that he's probably the one that I'll end up highest on, but I don't have a lot of confidence in that call.
All right. How about your favorite Galaxy Brain idea? It's always tough to walk the line of something that can actually work versus, something that's just being too overtly crazy, like when people want to just like draft one quarterback or, stuff like that. But do you have anything in that sweet spot for a Gal Brain idea that's feasible?
Yeah, a pretty mild take, I think, for me. It's still kind of Gal Brain. I think week 16 is underemphasized relative to week 17. We all come out, we memorize the week 17 schedule. You have all the little, things to help us remember that schedule. However, we're only on average going to get one team to BBM every 10 years if you're just doing the average advance rate stuff. However, you're going to get a couple to week 16. And so I do think it's worth emphasizing just a little bit of week 16 correlation. And so at least in BBM, not for some of the other ones that aren't quite as brutal in the playoff weeks, I am doing some more week 16 correlation. If I have one week 17 stack, I'm willing to just take, 2 or 3 mini correlations in week 16 that might be enough to get me out of a, 1 out of 15 pod or whatever it is.
How are you actually doing that in practice? Do you have the week 16 memorized? Or are you using kind of an overlay to help keep you up to speed on that? Because I'm the same way, where it's like, even with the overlay that shows me the week 16, I still sometimes just forget to think about it. So how are you actually doing that?
Yeah, so on my fast drafts, it'll be an overlay, one of the tools that allows me to turn that slider up or emphasize week 16 more than week 17. And, you can change it throughout the draft often. The slow drafts, I usually just have like when all the schedule comes out, everybody drops the playoff schedule, and I'll have a picture with the playoff schedule, and I'll just go off that. So it's a lot easier. I'm also doing a lot of sprint drafts right now. So it's kind of natural to, you're getting exposure to those things anyway. So I could probably rattle off a couple of the week 16 teams if I had to. So yeah, kind of different approaches for fast and slow, but something I want to emphasize.
Yeah, and if people aren't familiar with the sprint, it's basically just like BBM, except there's no pods for weeks 15 and 17. So if you advance from your 2 of 12 into the playoff pod, it's just the best team that made it for that 3-week sprint. So the correlations aren't important on an individual week basis, but those 3 weeks in totality are very important. You can do some round robining with correlations and obviously target, teams with better playoff schedules, game environments, etc. All right. How about the favorite one here at the end? People always looking for a sleeper, maybe a low owned guy who doesn't always get drafted. Favorite 18th round dart throw right now?
So I try to rotate it. I don't want to become too attached to any of these guys. And I've kind of gone through a few spurts. Tutu Atwell was the first, kind of moved on.
Okay.
So the latest ones for me, I'm calling it Meet the Mitchells. It's Keaton Mitchell. It's Adonai Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell averaging 8 yards per carry 2 years ago, playing with Lamar Jackson, huge gravity for a rushing quarterback. We saw some of that with Derrick Henry last year. And I don't think that if Derrick Henry was to get hurt, that Justice Hill is stepping into any type of higher rushing volume role. That would probably be Keaton Mitchell, who could potentially be very explosive and efficient behind that. And then for Adonai, again, Colts pass catcher situation is bad, but and his production was bad last year. But if you look at a lot of the charting, if you look at some of the advanced metrics, he drew targets, he got open. I think Ian Hartlett's had a clip going around about all the overthrows, near misses that he had, a few touchdowns. So in terms of just like round 18, bet on talent at receiver, he's a guy that I'm interested in right now, especially when if I miss on Downs, if I miss on Pittman, then maybe one of those guys got hurt and Adonai's playing more than we think, and we go from there.
Yeah, it's funny then too with AD Mitchell, but it sounds so. Have you been doing teams with Downs and Mitchell, but just no Colts quarterback and just kind of playing your stacks elsewhere?
I try to not double up the Colts pass catchers very much, especially Downs and Pittman. I really only want one, with Richardson and Jones there. I'm okay doing 80 with one of those two guys, but I prefer just only one Colts pass catcher. If I have both, then and I got like really, I missed out on quarterbacks, got sniped ahead of time, then maybe a Daniel Jones here or there, but I don't want to bet on Daniel Jones on an 18 round roster. I'll save that for the 20 round stuff if need be.
That's fair. All right, Madison, I hopped us into a draft here, and look at this, the Influencer 101. And, one thing maybe you knew from watching some of the other Deposit Kingdom videos, maybe you didn't. The goal now is going to be to try to accomplish as many of the objectives of many of your favorite, stack structures, player targets that you outlined at the top during that questionnaire. And, we got to do it in the best way possible. We're not going to try to throw a draft and take Josh Downs in the 5th round just to make sure we get him. But it would be fun if we could pull that off. With the 101, I don't think anything really compromises any of your early preferences, other than if you wanted to have CD as part of a stack. But I assume we take advantage of the opportunity of getting Ja'Marr Chase here.
Yeah, Ja'Marr Chase, 100%. Especially in BBM right now, I think it's interesting. You can try to push the Burrow, see if you get the great value. So Ja'Marr Chase for sure.
Yep. So we'll lock up Ja'Marr Chase here. I'm excited about this because just BBM wise, I think I've only gotten a couple, one Ja'Marr Chase share before this. So I'm slightly behind expectation on Ja'Marr Chase teams, and always nice to get him. Is he head and shoulders your 101 up there, or do you have any other guys you'd mix in if you got really overweight on Chase?
No, I'll take Chase every time. I don't meaningfully think he's that different than Jefferson or Lamb. I think they're all in the same tier. Based on the year, any of those guys I could see as the 101. But I don't want to be underweight Ja'Marr Chase. One thing I say that might separate him, at least it has so far in his career, is his nuclear spike week upside is a little different than those guys. His yak ability is different than Jefferson, and that separates him, and then his deep threat ability from Lamb. So overall, season-long projection, I think they're similar, but I'm just going to take Chase 101, and I'll get the exposure to other guys later on.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that's kind of fun, I'm starting to think through now, and we should kind of some of the other targets potentially. George Kittle, really sweet spot at the 4-5 turn, if that lines up for us. In Pickens, I think, would line up pretty decently there as well. So that could be something we circle if it works out. Any other things with your preferences, obviously the 1-2-5-1 player targets, how you think about it through the lens of a 101 slot?
So at the 2-3 turn right now, I really like taking one running back and locking up one of those, close to elite RBs there. So especially with already having Chase. And then usually a receiver, potentially Trey McBride at the 2-3 turn. And then that kind of sets you up to, maintain flexibility if you have a super faller at one of the other positions. And you can still, if you want to double tap receiver at 4-5, you still can. So that's kind of my usual approach, unless there's a faller that changes that.
Yep. For sure. Yeah. And that is the nice thing about this side of the board. If you are trying to get that elite tight end, obviously Bowers is, close to zero to fall to you there, but McBride readily available there. And then, like we said, Kittle at the 4-5 turn. So that does work out nicely. And then we could also think a little bit, week 16 correlations. You mentioned that Jamar Chase plays Miami. So that's one we can, put in the back of our head here as we think through some of these correlations.
Yeah, Chase Tyreek is pretty fun. I've been doing that in sprint some because that's just potential nuclear ceiling. But he's probably a little too early. BBM, maybe a Waddle later on. But that's here, true.
Yeah, we're on the clock here. T. Higgins, Trey McBride, Wilson, Harrison, Chase Brown. How do you want to play this?
It'd be either McBride or Higgins for me to start. Happy to go either one of those.
Let's do McBride just so we can avoid the whole, hoping Burrow comes back or having to decide between that or whatever.
Yeah. And then here I probably would just go Chase Brown to lock up the running back. You get obviously you have the Cincy correlation. So
let's do that. Yeah. I like this start here. Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, Trey McBride, we get that elite tight end you mentioned you like getting, and then Chase Brown getting that high end running back, especially too, because, you think about the positions we were talking about the 4-5 turn. Yes, Omari and Hampton will sometimes slide to you there, but if he's not there, now with Mixon dropping, Harvey dropping, it's not actually a good spot for getting a running back at 4-5.
Exactly. Yeah. That with the news the other day, that really solidified it for me. And I think Hampton's going to go there. We've seen him fall from the beginning of the 4th round already. Najee is, I think Najee and even Vidal was getting some camp hype from Greg Roman the other day. So I think Hampton will be a 4-5 turn pick. So I don't know if we're really getting that much closing line value with him there. So yeah, for me right now, 4-5 turn is very much receiver, Kittle, or Hurts, just based on what the team looks like.
Yep. Yeah, and then if you're doing the Hurts stuff, obviously it's nice if you can do the Devontae and Hurts double tap. Otherwise, are you kind of content doing Hurts with Goddard or just kind of Hurts naked?
Yeah, I am. Hurts with before the tush push ruling scared me a little bit. Didn't really want to take him unstacked, but now with the no concerns on that, I'm perfectly happy to take him when he falls to the 5th, regardless of if I have Devontae or AJ Brown, and then hopefully target Goddard later. But it's not a must-have. I don't think Hurts could easily just have a 2 rushing touchdown game. That gets you, above 30 points for a spike week. And then you rely on your other pieces for correlation to get to that nuclear ceiling outcome.
Yep. I do love too how we, our Galbrain week 16, and we start out with just the quintessential week 17 stack: Jamar Chase, Trey McBride, Chase Brown. I don't think I have a start like this yet, just because I've had so few one-on-ones.
I've done a few with all the Bengals and the puppies to try to push Burrow all the way, and that's pretty fun too, because then you're really telling whoever else is going to take Burrow, you will not have a top Bengals piece. Mike Gesicki is your piece, and so I've done that a few times, and that's really fun too. But McBride, obviously, if you get the elite tight end spike week in that with that team, you're going to the top of the leaderboard pretty quick.
In an effort to use you as inspiration with the Week 16 stuff, I'm going to keep checking in on our other players that we add in their Week 16 matchup. Trey McBride, Week 16, opposite Atlanta. So we got Miami and Atlanta as the potential other Week 16 considerations as we build this team out, starting Jamar Chase, Trey McBride, Chase Brown. We do see George Kittle go at pick 41. So if we had passed on McBride hoping he would come back, that would have been a bummer. So in this instance, nice to lock up your elite 1 tight end there early.
Yeah, agreed. When we took McBride, that was the kind of the one concern. But with Kittle off the board, love locking up elite tight end there. Here,
so we're now on the clock.
Waddle is still there.
Yeah, Waddle's still here.
Yeah, I think. Waddle would be good. And then it's kind of it's really, I would just mix and match here for the other guys. Pickens, Hampton, either of those guys I think is fun. I think you want to try to push Burrow. I'm not sure where the T. Higgins drafter is. If he took another quarterback, then that would be great. But
the T. Higgins drafter didn't take another quarterback. Let's do Pickens. You want to go for the Dak stack?
Yeah, sounds great.
See, now we're back. We talk about the Week 16 correlation. You come in there with Waddle opposite our Cincy guys, and then we get George Pickens to set up that potential Dak stack, which is one of your favorites. I do think Amari and Hampton perfectly in play there, but if we're close, we gotta complete the challenges, right?
Yeah, 100%. I'm not going to complain there at all. Like I said, the weekly ceiling for George Pickens is just so high that I love targeting him in that range.
How are you thinking about Waddle? You mentioned, Waddle in relation to Tyreek Hill. You mentioned being interested in him, drafting him in some other contests. I think the market has definitely been spooked at Tyreek. I've been getting him like late round 3 in a decent amount of drafts. How are you thinking in general about Tyreek, Waddle and that passing offense?
I think they're very likely to be dramatically undervalued right now, but the risk on all of the individual pieces is really high. And so that makes it tough, to take a strong stand on any one of them. With Tyreek, obviously, if he's still Tyreek, then he's 2 rounds underpriced, but he's probably not. And then if Waddle gets back to how he was 2 years ago, then he's probably a round or 2 underpriced, especially if Tyreek falls off, then Waddle might be just the number 1 in that offense and you're getting him in the 5th round. But then what's going to happen with Jonnu? We don't really know. Is Tua back? Is Tua still concussion risk? The offensive line was horrible last year. They reworked the interior of the line, but the offensive tackles are a huge question mark. So it's just a very challenging thing to analyze and try to take a strong stance on. Right now, at least, I prefer playing it through Achane and Waddle. But when you look at your exposures and you see Tyreek Hill 4% in the 3rd round, it's not a comfortable feeling. He could easily just smash that. So that's where I'm at right now with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I like how you worded that about the individual risk. But man, if they get back to form, that's why one take I had been floating around, and I guess it works more specifically with Achane and one of the wide receivers, because I do think the super high end outcomes for Waddle probably involve, less desirable outcomes for Tyreek. But Achane as a 2nd round pick, if that offense gets back to what it was, is going to be a 1st round value. And so pairing Achane with Tyreek or Achane with Waddle seems pretty sharp.
Yeah, love the Achane Waddle combination, and it's not that difficult to do at ADP. It's only a couple spots, and I do think that I'll target more Achane as McCaffrey moves up. I don't really love the McCaffrey Achane start right now, but I wanted to get my McCaffrey in before he moved up. But as he moves up, I think I'll have a lot of teams where it's like Puka, Neighbor, Nico, those guys, plus Achane, and then get Waddle in the 5th. That's kind of the build I expect to do more as the summer goes on.
So I promised to keep tabs on Week 16 correlations. George Pickens plays the Chargers in Week 16 there. We're heading into the 6th and 7th round. One other thing I'm looking ahead for, because Josh Downs, of course, one of your favorites, falls into kind of a dicey range for us in that his ADP's at 87. Would you consider him at the 7-8 turn, or just say, hey, I like Downs, but in this case, unless he comes back to me at 97, I don't have interest?
73 is starting to get pretty tough. It's right on that range. I think if Reed and Golden are still there, I don't think you can do it, basically, is the line for me.
I can't believe this, but Burrow went past the Higgins drafter. Excited to lock that up?
Yeah, that's a run to the podium snap pick for sure. And then probably for me, I'd go running back here. But I think Montgomery's probably probably Montgomery.
Yep, Montgomery slightly past ADP here. Man, I'm getting a glitch on my screen. There we go. Was worried we weren't going to get him. Yeah, we add David Montgomery there. Yeah, that is so what I've seen with the Burrow is if you take Chase and Higgins, you can often get Burrow to come back because then there's no one else. The Chase Brown drafter doesn't really do it. But if you are the Chase drafter who let him go, the Higgins drafter always says, no, I'll protect him getting all the way back. But in this case, the Higgins drafter took Jalen Hurts and then decided they didn't want to double up on quarterback. So that worked out really well for us.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And I mean, credit to him. Like Hurts in the 5th round there is great. I think that's a value. There's nothing wrong with doing that, especially because Burrow often doesn't get back. Somebody decides to protect the integrity of the contest at pick 60 or whatever. So worked out great for both of us. He gets a Hurts value. We obviously get a huge Burrow value and a super high upside stack for both week 17 and week 16.
I've been laughing at for people who aren't criminally online. There's been these vigilante, protectors out here. So anytime that Joe Burrow might slide back to the Chase team in the late 7th round, they're willing to take them unstacked to kind of ruin or make their own team less optimal just to protect the integrity of the contest. And what's so funny about that is like you look at a lot of ranks in a lot of ways, like projections actually value Joe Burrow. It's like right around pick 73 or 74. It's basically saying like he falls back to where he should go and everyone else is reaching to lock up that correlation, which if you weigh the loss in value versus the correlation boost, it's probably like more of a wash than anything else. But yes, people do not like the idea of Chase drafters getting Joe Burrow at pick 72.
Yeah, I don't want to say that. I don't want to be too mean to those folks, but we've done the quarterback, like push the pocket passer quarterback thing for a few years now on Underdog. I made the mistake actually at the start of the big board. I thought Mahomes would stay like towards pick 75. And then, even with Mahomes, it's like, nope, we're going to push him. It just becomes a contest of how far we can push the pocket passers and stack them. So all the pocket passers just keep sliding in ADP from the start of the contest, at least in this range until you get to the, past pick 100. So not a lot of CLV on the Burrow pick for those folks, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's funny how like I think our brains work, and this happens when we talk about week 17 correlation. It happens when we talk about stacking. It's like we always want to do like the first version of it. So it's like we want our very first 3 picks all week 17 correlated, or we want our first wide receiver pick. Like we have to get that stacked up or whatever, or the first viable stack. And it's like, there are other stacking options. There are backdoor stacking options. And I do think sometimes those more creative stacks, Joe Burrow isn't the best example because there's not a lot of good pass catchers there, but it's like, oh, how many of the Bo Nix teams are paired with Cortland Sutton? Because that's the comfy versus doing the Bo Nix back stack. So I do like thinking of those all angles.
Yeah, Bo Nix is a great example of that because he's got so many just deep threat type guys going late. And then slightly lesser extent, I think CJ Stroud is a little fun when you get that. Like you get the Jalen Knoll rookie upside in a range that nobody wants to take receiver, where all it takes is one injury and he's playing in 3 receiver sets. And if Stroud goes off, they're playing the Chargers. Like there's a lot of upside to that as well. So yeah, I think that's a great call.
Pour one out for Josh Downs. He did not slide like Joe Burrow all the way back to us at 96. He goes at pick 86, but we will recover. We got a 1-2-3-1 build here, about to pick at the 8-9 turn. Kupp, Keon Coleman, Burden are the wide receivers by ADP. Trey Harris as well. What are you thinking through here?
I really like double receiver here. Normally not great with some of those guys going. I'm just so down on Kupp. So probably one of Burden or Harris, a little rookie upside. Harris, I think, plays Dallas.
Yeah, I'll slide that in at the last second to keep our week 16 correlation theme going. And then what do you want to do with the other one?
So I usually hear probably just break a bye week thing for receiver. So not Kupp, but one of Coleman or Burden more than likely.
Yeah, both of them are in the clear bye weeks because we're 12 and 10. So you good with Burden there at pick 97?
Yeah, and here I think it's not ideal that you don't get one of Pittman, Mooney, Downs, guys that we think are pretty good. However, What I think you can do on teams like this that make that the draft is giving us right now is you can take 2 high upside rookies here that are being discounted a little bit, especially Burden, because of some injury considerations. And then later you can look to buy your routes cheap. So there's a bunch of guys now, kind of starting with like Josh Palmer-ish, Romeo Dobbs, guys like that, where you can, Darius Slayton, you can buy a bunch of 2 receiver, 3 receiver set veterans at the very end of drafts and say, okay, like these guys just got to get me to week 6, week 7, and then hopefully Burden and Harris is starting to emerge down the stretch. So that's usually, when I miss on, the Downs, Pittman, Mooney, those type of guys, that's usually the strategy I try to approach here.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think that conversation is often had more so at the running back position, where people talk about, layering the type of profiles. And it's like, if you're taking all the rookie shots or, backup contingent handcuffs, you're going to need, and I think the popular term these days is chaperone, as far as, your Austin Eckler's, these guys who are going to give you some points. But thinking through it at wide receiver as well, as excited as we get about guys like Trey Harris and Luther Burden, if we're honest with ourselves, we know if they're really smashing, it's probably coming in the back half of the season.
Yeah, exactly. Those guys, I think with Trey Harris, I really like him as a prospect, but we see these like X-type receiver who play on the outside have slow development curves all the time. And so I do think he's probably a more slower developing the guy with Justin Herbert there. Burden is interesting to me because I kind of think he's their best yak guy, like as soon as he walks in the room. And so if they try to get the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands more quickly this year, I do think you could just see some like 6 for 50 games right off the bat for Burden. And that can easily grow, later in the season. He's improving his route running, better chemistry. They're emphasizing his role down the stretch. So even with the soft tissue stuff, the slow start for him, his yak ability and short ADOT probably helps him a little bit, cushions him a little bit more than some of the other rookies that typically go in this range.
Yeah, I was talking. Yeah, Pat on Best Ball Breakfast was making an impassioned case for Luther Burden being too cheap. And, one of the things about it of just like, it's so rare that an offense we're all excited about, that you can play it through the cheapest piece, and the cheapest piece happens to be the newest addition, the rookie, the shiniest new thing that the new coaching staff made their guys, put their imprint on. Like normally we have to pay more of a premium, and it's like, take the boring incumbent, the veteran on the cheap side as the cheap way to play it. But here we get to have the 2, round 1 or nearly round 1, draft capital rookies as the cheapest pieces of this offense.
Yeah, in some ways, it reminds me a couple years ago of when we took Elijah Moore like 3 rounds ahead of Garrett Wilson. And then in retrospect, we were like, well, that was a really bad idea. Garrett Wilson is better in every way. And so I think, their ceiling outcomes for Burden, he's just better DJ Moore in a lot of cases. Better yak ability, grows into a higher target share. So it's a little bit of an arbitrage situation, I think, with some really, really high ceiling outcomes.
So they blew up our Dak stack. The CeeDee Lamb drafter had to get them. Hard to begrudge them that click there. Justin Herbert is still on the board here. Najee, Tootin, Javonte, Colston Loveland, Mims. What direction you want to go here?
Probably Najee, and then follow that up with Herbert.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and bet on the Chargers. I don't mind the Dak. I don't mind the Dak snipe in any way because of the bye week. I usually try not to double up quarterback bye weeks.
Oh, good call. Yeah.
I know this from personal experience of getting Burrow at 72 or whatever, and then turning around and taking Dak, and it's like, okay, I blew up my value there. So happy here. I haven't written about it much, talked about it much so far, but I really do think that if the Chargers are willing to throw the ball like we saw down the stretch last year and play at a faster pace, then we could see a really, really good offense with Justin Herbert at the helm. It's probably the best offensive line of his career. I think they're like top 10-ish last year in both pass and run block win rate. They obviously have fun new pieces. They have depth at receiver, 4 starter-ish guys now, which he's never had before. It's basically just the Keenan and Mike Williams show. So I think you could see a very fun offense. And he is right in that 2 quarterback window range that I really like targeting.
Yeah, I like it too. Najee slides past ADP. On the flip side, because we were just having the conversation about Luther Burden and not having week one brain or being worried necessarily about a slow start. How do you think about it on the flip side with Najee, a guy who will likely get replaced by Omarion Hampton at some point? Or do you disagree? Like, how do you think about his role on a best ball team?
Yeah, I mean, he's like the leading chaperone, essentially. I think is the way you would put it. Like he's not great. He's just an early down guy, but we have seen him be very durable. We've seen him be able to carry high weekly workloads. He can take on a receiving role if no one else is there. So if Hampton were to miss time early, like Najee is probably consolidating a lot of work, not being that efficient with it, more than likely. But I will say, and I haven't been on Najee Harris in a while, but it's not that dissimilar to what we saw with Saquon and Derrick Henry improving their environments. Like he's going from the Steelers' dysfunctional offense behind a bad offensive line with a huge offensive line upgrade, a good offensive coordinator who designed run games, and Justin freaking Herbert. This is, there's probably a little bit upside there. So Hampton, I think, limits that, but he's a very fun chaperone, I guess is the way I put it.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe another comp for it, and it's funny because we have David Montgomery on this team, is you're kind of saying the Chargers are really good and there's enough production where Najee could be the Montgomery and Omarion Hampton is kind of the Gibbs, and the pie is big enough for both of them to pay off.
Yeah, I think that's right. It might be, we're talking about the Lions offense, which is incredible, obviously. So yeah. Hopefully the Chargers get to that. But that I think the comparison is right. And that would be, obviously very fun for Najee, Herbert, all of them.
We did we accomplish too? I know we breezed past it, the 1-2-5-1 through 9 rounds. I think we exactly hit that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Set ourselves up well with the Burrow pick.
Here, what do you like here?
Probably Josh Palmer to get some early season rounds.
Yep, let's lock him in
and
as
then
a wide receiver selection.
And then I think it's either Rachaad White, who I like, or if Jalen Knoll is in. I'm not sure where he goes right now.
I will say Jalen Knoll, who I like, has been sliding a lot. I think we might be able to get him back. Yeah. We'll get Rachaad White here. We get another bring back there too on the Miami stuff. Jalen Waddle plays Rachaad White in week 17, so that's nice there. And then like you said, Knoll is nice because that would be opposite the Chargers in week 17. Some of the other ones to catch up on as far as week 16 correlations. The nice thing about the Chargers, we have the Dallas, so you kind of back in to even more correlation there. David Montgomery plays the Steelers. Rachaad White plays the Panthers. And then the only other one we haven't maybe discussed, Burden plays the Packers in week 16, and Palmer plays Cleveland in week 16. But a really nice blend of team level correlation and week 16 and week 17 so far.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do with most of my teams right now. I think it's, you're building multiple ways you can get there in the playoff weeks when you do that. I think I also heard you say we have the Packers for 16. I think just thinking on the way back, again, if we can buy early season routes, if he falls, Romeo Doubs would be a prime target for that. And then if I could just speak to Rachaad White for a second. Rachaad White, not a great rusher, and we know that. We know who he is at this point. However, what I would say is that if you want to look at receiving upside, ability to consolidate volume, if Bucky Irving went down on a good offense, Rachaad White can offer that. He can be a 3.5, 4 yards per carry guy and then catch 6 passes, and he's a good receiver. So I think when you're looking at him as an RB2 in that range, RB2 in a real team, he does have some contingent upside and as well as some standalone volume probably with that receiver role. So he's a guy that's been pretty interesting to me, especially assuming I have another Buccaneer or I have Jalen Waddle or one of the Dolphin guys. He's a good option in those middle rounds to target for running back.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and it's one I've been thinking about. And it's funny because we see Rachaad White and Tyler Algier going back to back here, and it's like this phenomenon. Oh, I guess Tyler Algier technically had a starting gig before they drafted Bijan, but these guys that we associate as just pure contingent backs, we think of them differently than we do a running back who got displaced, where Rachaad White has this sense like, hey, got beat by Bucky, but it doesn't change the contingent value. It doesn't change the standalone role. But I think psychologically, we like the cleaner, like, Algier or Benson or Garendo or whatever, just because they weren't displaced in the first place, even though the bet isn't any different than Rachaad White.
Yeah, we don't know those guys are bad in some things yet. We haven't learned their flaws. We know that Rachaad White is not a good rusher, and so to your point, like, we're just less excited about that. But when it's priced in like this, and he's priced in this range, it's totally fine at that point. We know he's bad at rushing, but that's okay. He's a great receiver, and he can consolidate volume if he has to. So he has a purpose on teams like this, I think.
One thing there too, I'm thinking about some of our late round darts too. If we're reverse engineering anything there, can keep tabs on Keaton Mitchell and AD Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell obviously on Baltimore. Was that in any of our correlations? Chase Brown week 15. Maybe not. I was thinking of Baltimore and Green Bay, so I was already trying to triangulate one of our week 16 to then get to Keaton Mitchell. But yeah, we're about to pick here, and Jalen Knoll.
I think Baltimore is a week 15 with Cincy.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, Jalen Knoll here I think makes a lot of sense, and then Micah Gesicki, I think, if he is still able, would get us the Burrow double.
Yeah. Yep. I think that lines up really well. Jalen Knoll, their opposite are Chargers is the bring back, and then Gesicki continuing to take advantage of our really cheap Bengals stack with Burrow. You reach just slightly ahead of ADP to lock up Gesicki along with Chase and Chase Brown. So that team stack came together at a really nice price point.
Yeah, that's, we're more correlation. We're already betting on the Bengals. I think now, not the Ravens yet, but if we get Keaton Mitchell, we're betting on the Bengals in every single week in the playoffs, which is something I'm, totally okay with. So that's very fun. And then I think with Gesicki, and since you're already betting on Burrow, Burrow is healthy, the Bengals are playing pretty well. That probably enables you to simply do the 2 tight end build. You don't have to worry about tacking on a third. Not that it would be necessarily bad, but one more shot at running back or receiver to take an upside swing on, which makes some sense, I think, especially given how we've constructed our receiver room at this point.
Yeah, and I do think this is kind of an interesting spot where we're really balanced. I don't think any of our position groups are behind the 8 ball. And at the same time, if you had a really clean third quarterback upside option if you had a really clean third tight end option, I think you'd be fully justified in doing it. And you could also, with we got 3 picks left, do 1 to 2 running backs with 1 to 2 wide receivers as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We've seen with some of the tools come out that it's totally okay to target a third tight end or a third quarterback. You don't have to just do the 2-6-8-2. It enables you to have a little more freedom at the end of drafts. So that's something that I think normally I would be okay with if there was a huge faller at one of those, or if you had a stacked quarterback. With this team, I'm not sure we'll have that, but I think it's totally fine if you wanted to do that.
So thinking about our late round darts, are we in the portion of the draft where you would consider getting one of those first 2 or one of the Mitchells, I should say, or are those guys kind of reserved for hey, if they happen to be there in the 18th, I'll take them, but I'm not going to force the issue?
Nope. For me, as soon as round 16 starts, it's scroll down time. Take whoever you want. There's really no projection edge at this point. Take whoever fits the team. So for me, on this team, I think it would be Keaton Mitchell. Adonai 80 Mitchell doesn't fit the team quite that well, just based on how we've constructed our receiver room. It's more like the Darius Slayton, if Tutu Atwell's here, one of those guys who we're going to have some early season routes on that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, let me so we can talk this through. I'll let it time out on Keaton Mitchell. We'll plan on taking him, and then we could talk through. I put Tutu and Slayton in the queue. Any correlation stuff or any other tiebreakers for you there?
I'd take Tutu. I'd bump Tutu up right now. We can probably push Keaton.
Okay. I got Tutu up there. Who would you want to take ahead of Keaton? I will say I've been seeing Keaton regularly go in the 18th now.
Okay, let's take Keaton, and then we can find one more cheap receiver who's going to run some routes for us.
Okay. Yeah, I was. I haven't been. The reason I know this is because I've been in these like Schnauzer drafts and stuff, and I've been trying to get a little more Keaton Mitchell, and every time I search his name in round 18, he's gone. So I think the cat's out of the bag a little bit on him right now.
That is unfortunate. I was really hoping to get a higher amount on him before that happens, but I mean, he's not going to rise that much. What do you think? Like round 16 is probably the ceiling?
Yes, agreed. Like he could maybe push up against like the Giddens of the world, obviously flip Justice Hill, but I have a hard time seeing him like, surpass a Rico or a Braylon Allen type.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's interesting. This Braylon Allen, I have just not taken him at all because he's priced in a range as like a clear-cut RB2. Like he's not that far behind Eckler and Algier and some of those guys, but is he the RB2? Wasn't he worse than Isaiah Davis last year? Hasn't the Jets coach speak been talking up, both of those guys behind Bric?
Yeah, they've talked up Isaiah Davis a good bit. My hunch is what's happening with this ADP is a lingering holdover from the, what if Breece Hall gets traded kind of stuff, and people selling themselves on this extra out that if Breece Hall was removed, all of a sudden, Braylon Allen would obviously be a smash at this price. But I think it's more tied into that than what, to your point, his, locked and loaded RB2 status.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one I hadn't really considered anymore. I remember that happening during like the big board of Braylon Allen kind of shooting up, and I got that, but I hadn't thought about that in so long that, it makes sense that it's lingering on like that to a certain extent. And he could easily be the RB2, and at that point, he'd be a perfectly fine pick there. I haven't bought into it yet.
So we have this final pick, the Mr. Irrelevant in this draft. We have a 25882, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Chase Brown, David Montgomery, Najee Harris, Rashad White, Keaton Mitchell, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, George Pickens, Trey Harris, Luther Burden, Joshua Palmer, Jalen Knoll, Tutu Atwell, Trey McBride, Mike Gesicki. You still think ninth wide receiver? Or are there any other positions that are piquing your attention?
I think it's okay to go running back here too. Usually I'd say I'd probably end with 6, but with the guys we have a lot of, guys who are going to play. We're not betting on a lot of contingent upside.
True.
So I think on this team, I think it's probably a receiver for me. I think if Ray McLeod is there, like he's going to run a bunch of routes, and I think he has some correlation for us. And then if we wanted to go running back, I think it's probably just Blake Corum, where you just bet on the contingent upside. You already bet on Stafford to stay healthy with Tutu. So I think either one of those, and you can make a case based on your positional evaluations for the players that we already have.
Yeah. Ray does have that correlation across the board. Opposite Rashad White, week 15, opposite McBride, 16, and opposite Tutu in 17 there. I'm down for that. And it kind of does pair well, right? Like we mentioned Trey Harris, Luther Bird, and Jalen Knoll, like 3 guys who could have very flimsy production for a good chunk of the season. And then you pair them each with a direct chaperone, Palmer, Tutu, and Ray, and let those guys pass the baton to the rookies at the end of the season.
Yeah, exactly that. Not exactly I'd say my normal draft. I'm usually a little stronger receiver. I'm usually taking Downs or Pittman in that range. But I like the team, I think, as long, we're going to have some hits at receiver to make it work. But I think you said earlier that the rest of the team just solid across the board.
Yes. And to, recap our objectives, the 1, 2, 5, 1 through 9 rounds, we hit that. Being able to get the Joe Burrow slide and then Trey McBride at ADP helped accomplish that. along with Chase Brown and David Montgomery as our 2 running backs, and then built out those 5 wide receivers as well. Favorite player target, Josh Downs, missed out on him. That was just a product of being on the wrong side of the board for him. Favorite stack, Dak with CD and or Pickens. We'll give it a yellow check mark. We'll give it half there, getting George Pickens. But as Madison pointed out, with the double bye week, that wouldn't have been ideal anyways. So a pretty natural pivot there to Justin Herbert. And I think the thing we executed the best was all of our week 16 correlation. We have a ton of it. Joe Burrow opposite the Miami guys in week 16, Herbert opposite Dallas in week 16. We even got, what was the other one that we got in there? I think that might have been it. Oh, Ray McLeod opposite Trey McBride. So some week 16 correlation for our 2 main stacks, which is always really nice. And then we got Keaton Mitchell, one of your favorite 18th round darts. So you mentioned a little bit different of a team than you normally draft, but how do you overall feel about this squad?
Yeah, obviously the Burrow fall it was huge for us. That's really the Kickstarter. That's the ADP value that you really want to get. And then, yeah, I think quarterback really strong, tight end very strong. The running back room is going to be solid from day one. Just need those guys to stay healthy. And then receiver, you're just essentially betting that 1 or 2 of the 3 rookies that we took, as long as they develop and are playing well by midseason, then this team has a pretty strong chance, I think, of advancing. And then in the playoffs, I think it's best suited to get you to week 17. But even if you get there, like you said, we still have some correlation, basically betting on the Bengals to be the team you need in the playoffs. So love it.
Yeah, love it as well. Definitely probably my most correlated team. And it was fun to do a draft, like specifically through the lens of week 16 more than I did in a muscle I want to work more. And if you guys want to see more of Madison Parkhill, one of my favorite writers in the fantasy space, has an awesome Substack called Reducing Uncertainty. I'll drop it in the show notes here. If you subscribe to Gretch's, if you subscribe to Jacob Sanderson's Substack, you will very much enjoy Madison's. Tons of best ball content and also stuff outside of it. Does kind of a link roundup, stuff he's reading. So I always enjoy getting Madison's thoughts. Madison, thank you so much for swinging by the Deposit Kingdom today.
Cheers, Pete. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed it. And hopefully we see this team advance at the end of the year.
Beautiful. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe. We'll have more videos like this as well. Also working on a fun strategy video I hope to get out in the coming weeks. We'll see you guys next time on the Deposit Kingdom. Peace.